to LinuxMint 13 XFCE Bootcamp. In this series, I am going to be covering installation, customization, and just about most of the things the average user would want to know about LinuxMint 13 XFCE edition. In this first episode, I am going to cover the installation of LinuxMint 13 XFCE edition, and we're going to do that right now on Spatry's Cup of Linux. Alright, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and get started, folks. Alright, first, I want to explain that I am doing everything in a simulation. I'm using VirtualBox, and this VirtualBox install has Windows XP installed in it, and I'm going to do that for this demonstration today because when you install Linux and you want to dual boot, there may be some things that you may not understand in the installer, so I want to cover those items. Plus, I want to also cover a possible bump in the road some of you may encounter. So, without further ado, I have the live CD already installed here. We're going to go ahead and we are going to select to install LinuxMint by double-clicking on it. The first thing that the installer is going to ask us is which language we want to install it in. Obviously, I want to select English. Next, the installer is going to probe and check and make sure that you have some conditions met for installation. And wants to make sure you've got at least 5.2 gigs of file space available, that you are plugged into a power source if you're using a laptop, of course, and that you are connected to the internet. This way it can download any language packs or anything else it feels that your system may need. Alright, so we just go ahead and press continue at this point. Next, it's going to give you some options for installation. Now, you can install LinuxMint alongside Windows. You can replace Windows with LinuxMint, or you can do something else. And this is only if you want to manually configure your drive partitions and that sort of thing. This is something I really don't do much of myself. Pretty much I like the defaults that it sets up because it scans your memory, it knows how much swap space to assign, and that sort of thing. Now, let's say that you have a HP laptop and you have all of its primary partitions, and I think there's 4 of them that you can have. Some HP laptops ship where all of the partitions are used up, in which case then you will not have this option to install LinuxMint alongside Microsoft Windows. Well, how do you fix that issue? Well, this is where Google is your friend. In this example, I was dealing with a Pavilion, which was a G6 model, and couldn't get it to dual boot because there were 4 partitions on that hard drive. And so I did some digging around on Google, and you will see here on page 2, I found this link here, Ubuntu on HP G6 laptop, Tales from the Grave. That one kind of caught my eye, and interestingly enough, all of the steps that are necessary for backing up your recovery partition is there, and he even has detailed instructions with pictorials that tell you how to back up those partitions and merge those drives together. Then once you have completed that, then you can boot your Linux CD, and you should be able to get an option to install alongside Windows. Now, for the benefit of everybody, I will include a link in the show notes so you can get to that page, because it doesn't matter what type of computer you're using. You should be able to follow those steps to back up your recovery partitions and that sort of thing. But let's say you already have the option to install LinuxMint alongside Microsoft Windows Professional, then you can just go ahead and press the continue button. Now, surprisingly, this doesn't give us too much in terms of graphics here, but I can tell you that what it's suggesting is the first part of the partition where Windows is installed is on the left, and on the right is where it's suggesting to install LinuxMint in this case. Now, remember, the beginning of the installer said 5.2 gigs of RAM, of hard drive space is required. And so if you know you're going to be using Windows an awful lot and you need your applications and that sort of thing, maybe you might want to allocate more space to it. So you can drag this slider over and select the amount of space that you want. I'd like to go with maybe close to 15 gigs. I'd say, okay, 15.9 gigs, and then give the rest to Windows. Now, your hard drive isn't going to be this size. It's probably a lot bigger. But once you are satisfied with the amount of space you want to allocate to Linux, in this case 15.9 gigs, then you can go ahead and press the Install Now button. Then, of course, it's going to give you a warning. You cannot undo this operation. It is going to resize your partitions and everything, and this may take a while to... Okay, now it's going to want to know what time zone we're in. So be sure to select your correct time zone and press Continue. In most cases, the installer should automatically detect your keyboard layout. You can go ahead and type in the box to test to make sure it's working. That looks cool to me. Okay, well, now we're going to need to put in our name. And a password, of course. And then we can continue. Interestingly enough, this is detected in my Windows folder, or my Windows drive, that I have a user account named XXX. So if I had important data that I wanted to infect my Linux install with, I suppose I could press the checkbox. There really isn't anything on there. It is just a bare bones install of Windows specific for this demonstration. But the thing is, if you do have files that you want to have imported, you're more than welcome to press that checkbox. I'm just going to leave that one alone. And then, of course, you're going to get this lovely little slideshow that's going to tell you just how much LinuxMint is going to change your life. I recommend you page through all of these little slides because it'll tell you some different things that you will be able to do with this operating system. Once the installation has completed, the installer automatically closes and you will get a prompt to either continue testing or restart your computer. So just go ahead and press the Restart Now button. Now, once your computer has restarted, you're going to see this menu, and this is called Grub. Now, the two most important selections you're going to see is the first one and the last one. The first one boots you into LinuxMint, and the last one boots you into Windows. Now, you may want to boot into Windows to make sure everything is working. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is a blue screen that states it wants to check your hard drive for consistency. This is normal. Just allow that procedure to complete, and your system should boot up just fine. I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video because my focus is Linux, not on what I believe to be the inferior Windows operating system. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and press Enter to boot LinuxMint. Okay, let's put in our username and password, and now we will be logging into our system for the first time. Okay, now that we are logged in, you will see the Welcome to LinuxMint message. I recommend that you continue to show this dialog at startup until you've had an option to look through all these features that you have here. You have documentation on the new features, known problems that are documented on this operating system, most likely items that are on the list to get fixed. And then there is a user guide. You have support for tutorials, forums, and then of course the IRC chat room where you can interact with somebody live to get you through any issues you may be experiencing. sponsors, donations, you can get involved. And then, of course, if you have ideas about this operating system that you would like to share, this would be a good place to start. Software reviews and hardware database. Now, something you may also see on the screen down here is the option to install proprietary graphics drivers. If you choose to do that, to install an NVIDIA or ATI driver, you do so at your own peril. Personally, I do not use the ATI drivers, and anybody that asks me any questions about ATI or NVIDIA drivers, unfortunately I am unable to answer those questions because I prefer to use the free and open source drivers. They do a nice enough job for me, and I'm very happy with them. Now down here you're going to see there's a shield, and there is an I, meaning important. That means there are 233 recommended updates available. My next episode is going to cover the use of the update manager. Also, I'm going to cover a item where you have margins on your screen where when you're clicking and a window doesn't fill the screen entirely. I will show you how to fix that as well. Well, that's all for today's tutorial. I'd like to thank you for watching, and stick around, there's more headed your way.